here staring at this great big wang doodle of a sheet of paper. I have no idea how in the world I'm going to work this into Bob's introduction. That's the challenge of the word of the day. The challenge, however, of Project 4 is to use words very well. Bob is in the Competent Communication Manual. Project 4 is entitled How to Say It. The goals of this project are to use your words vividly, to use them well, whether it's using triads to emphasize your points, using visual wording, similes and metaphors. How can you help your listener visualize what it is you're trying to say? Bob's speech is entitled Spirit of the Season. This is his fourth speech, as I mentioned. He's going to convey a special message about a time in his life that remains great in his memory. And he wants to use that wording to help you experience the same things that he has. He's going to focus on using those short descriptive words, attempt to limit the use of his notes, and being expressive using his vocal variety in his speech. It's primarily developed in a chronological order, about one season, but many from first to the recent. So please welcome Bob Smith with his speech, Spirit of the Season.
It was always late in the fall. Crops had been harvested, things around the farm had slowed down a little bit, and you could feel a nip in the air. All thoughts and talk started focusing on this magical place up north, and the heavy-set man in the red suit that made it all possible. Not quite that far north. The heavy-set man in the red suit was my dad pulling his red hunting suit out of mothballs. The magical place I'm talking about is deer camp. As a young boy, I heard stories of deer camp, and I imagined the time that I would move from a child to a hunter and join the other hunters in this magical place. Finally, the year came, 1968. I was going to deer camp, and I wasn't spending the fall at home with the other kids and the deer hunting widows. We usually headed up deer hunting 2 or 3 days before opening day. That helped us secure our special spot that we always hunted, because we hunted on state land in the first come, first served type basis. We had what I looked at as a traditional deer camp. We headed up north with our trailer, pickups, even some tents to round out the group. We would drive up north and we would pull off of the country paved road onto a gravel road, which fairly soon turned into a nice sand road. Eventually the sand road became a seasonal road, which up north means we're not going to maintain this, and if it snows, you're on your own. Eventually that sand road, the seasonal sand road, would turn into a 2-tracker. And when we got to the end of the 2-tracker, we were at deer camp. We usually left a couple days early, give us a chance to do a little scouting. We'd walk through the woods, and there were thousands of acres to cover, up and down huge hills, looking at oak ridges, going through some of the meadows, looking in the swamps, finding that perfect spot to ambush the big monster buck that was roaming the woods. And actually a monster buck in that area was more like a wang-a-doodle. There weren't many monster bucks up there. But, so all the preseason scouting and stuff, usually just walked out to the same spot I'd always hunted. I knew that spot, I knew that tree that leaned over and the little stool I left there year after year. So I would go hunt that same spot. But the night before deer season, often referred to as opening day eve, was always a time I struggled sleeping. And I think it was probably the visions of big bucks dancing in my head. It also may have been the fact that I shared a 6-by-7-foot bedroom with 5 other guys. All of them weighed over 200 pounds. A couple of them weighed over 300 pounds. Combine the close proximity of 6 people in a small area, with the fact most of them had been there 2 or 3 days, wearing the same clothes they had put on when they left home, living 2 to 3 days primarily on chili, Strohs, and Camel cigarettes. Just added to the ambiance of our camp. Finally, sleep came, and I woke in the morning to that wonderful sound of bacon frying and the smell that just sort of oozes in with all those other smells and tries to overwhelm them, hopefully. But in a small area like that, my bunk was within spattering distance of the frying pan. So I got to taste a little bacon before I even got out of bed. In our camp, everyone was in charge of cooking their own breakfast. We didn't have a camp chef for that. Everyone was in charge of cooking their own breakfast. Well, at age 14, I was pretty good at cereal. And if the toaster was preset, I could make toast. We didn't have any of that at deer camp. It was bacon and eggs. So my first morning breakfast for deer hunting was some relatively raw bacon with some burnt free-range eggs of an unknown age. Nighttime in deer camp. We'll only talk about the day of hunting. Nighttime at deer camp was when the magic really kicked in. We had a rule. The 2 youngest hunters were always in charge of cooking dinner and also washing dishes. Unfortunately, in 30 years of hunting, I never outgrew that role, which was a bad sign for the long-term survival of our deer camp. Rarely did I have to cook dinner. It's amazing. Take a big chili pot, and just once or twice, you drop the salt shaker in there, and somebody will step up and relieve you of that duty. Once dinner was over, the table was cleared, I would start doing dishes. And I'm only about this far from the card table. It was a small, compact area. I was doing dishes, but could lean over and play cards. So I would start doing dishes, and everybody play cards. And that we didn't have TV or radio in deer camp. So euchre and tales of that day's hunt, or a hunt 25 years ago, ruled the evening. Combine that with a few refreshments, and as the stack of empties grew, so did the tales. And you know, we tell the same stories year after year, over and over again, but they didn't always end the same. But nobody ever challenged the storyteller. That was just part of the unwritten rules of this magical place. One story we did tell every year that had the same ending was the year my cousin shot a nice buck while answering the call of nature. Every year when he arrived, there was a fresh roll of toilet paper just waiting for him on his bunk. Like all great events, eventually they come to an end. And that was the same for our deer camp. Some places will end suddenly, ours didn't. It dwindled over the years. One by one, some of the older hunters passed away. A few people quit hunting altogether. Some started hunting down around home where there were more and bigger deer. And yet others purchased property to hunt. By 1999, we were down to 5 hunters. And my dad, the heavyset man in the red suit that brought it all together, he said it was too cold for him to stay warm in deer camp anymore. He wasn't going. That brought an end to our deer camp. A tradition that had started in the 1930s and peaked probably in the late 60s, early 70s, with as many as 25 hunters. I'll use the word hunters very loosely. 25 hunters in our camp had dwindled down to just a handful. I guess like any other tradition, it eventually ends. I have continued to hunt. I hunt down on the farm in mid-Michigan. I'm significantly more successful hunting down there than I ever was up north. But I still miss deer camp and the spirits that made it a magical place. Thank you.